Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into The Value of Science today. It's by Richard Feynman.
Oh yeah, Feynman.
Yeah, have you read this one?
I have, yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah, and sometimes these scientific papers can be a little bit like reading another language.
A little dense sometimes.
Yeah. So we're gonna break it down for you today and hopefully have some fun along the way.
This is good.
So for anyone who might not know, who is this Richard Feynman guy? Well, he was a physicist who won a Nobel Prize.
hmm
And he was kind of famous for explaining really complicated stuff in a way that, like, normal people can understand.
Yeah,
Right.
he really had a knack for making complex ideas accessible. Like he could translate the language of the universe for us.
Exactly. So in this essay, Feynman starts off with this really interesting metaphor of science as a key.
Oh,
But he says it's a key to both heaven and hell.
ooh, that's a powerful image.
Yeah, and he even quotes this Buddhist proverb. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. To every man is given a key to the gates of heaven. The same key opens the gates of hell.
Wow. It really makes you think about the two sides of scientific progress, doesn't it? The potential for both good and bad.
Yeah, it does. And speaking of tough decisions, you mentioned before we started recording that you've been struggling with this decision about listener-specific dilemma.
Oh yeah.
I was wondering if you see this key metaphor playing out in your situation at all.
Hmm. You know, that's a really interesting connection. Now that you mention it, yeah, I could definitely see some parallels there.
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, listeners' situation could have some really positive outcomes. But then on the other hand, there are definitely some risks that I need to consider. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's like that with a lot of scientific advancements, isn't it? We have all this power to do amazing things, but there's also that responsibility.
Right. It's not just about what we can do, but what we should do.
Yeah.
We have to really think about the potential consequences
Yeah.
of our actions,
Yep.
both the good and the bad.
Absolutely. Like, take nuclear energy, for example. It has the potential to provide clean energy, which would be huge, but the risks associated with it are very real.
Exactly. And those risks need to be carefully weighed against the potential benefits. It's a complex issue for sure.
And it's interesting because right alongside all this talk about responsibility, Feynman also emphasizes the joy of scientific discovery.
Yes.
The sheer fun of it. He even describes this thought experiment of standing on the seashore and just contemplating the vastness of the universe and all the complexities of life.
Oh, I love that passage. It
Yeah.
always gives me goosebumps. It's like he's capturing that sense of awe and wonder that comes with exploring the unknown. And it's not just for scientists either. It's something we can all experience.
Yeah.
You mentioned you're learning how to host new skill. Are you finding that that's true for you? Are you experiencing that kind of awe and mystery as you delve deeper into it?
You know what? I am. It's like opening up this whole new world. And the more I learn, the more I realize how much more there is to discover.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending journey.
Yeah, and that brings us to another fascinating idea that Feynman introduces, which is this concept of a philosophy of ignorance. It sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Right. It does. At first.
Yeah, but he's basically saying that acknowledging what we don't know is actually crucial for progress.
Right. It's about being comfortable with uncertainty, with not knowing, and seeing that not as a weakness, but as a strength. Because it keeps us open to new information, to challenging our own assumptions, to keep learning and growing.
So it's like having the humility to say, I don't have all the answers,
Mhm.
but also the curiosity to keep asking questions.
Exactly. And that's really at the heart of the scientific method itself. Science is all about testing hypotheses, gathering evidence, and being willing to revise our understanding as we learn more. It's a continuous process of refinement, and it really thrives on embracing uncertainty.
So, okay, we've got science as this powerful key. It can unlock both incredible possibilities and dangerous consequences. We've got the importance of responsibility, but also the pure joy and wonder of exploration. And now we've got this intriguing idea of a philosophy of ignorance. Feynman really is giving us a lot to think about, isn't he?
He really is. It's amazing how much depth there is to this essay. And what's so cool about Feynman is that his ideas go way beyond science. They really apply to like learning and making decisions and even just how we live our lives.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's get practical for a minute. What does embracing a philosophy of ignorance actually look like in everyday life? How can we actually use that when we're facing like challenges and making tough decisions?
Well, I think it starts with being willing to say, I don't know, and being really genuinely curious about finding out more. Not feeling ashamed of what you don't know, but like seeing it as an opportunity to grow. Remember you were saying how you're feeling kind of stuck on that project at work?
Oh yeah, don't remind me. It's like I've hit a wall.
Okay, so what if you approach that project with Feynman's philosophy of ignorance in mind? Instead of getting discouraged by what you don't know what, if you saw it as like a puzzle to solve, like a mystery to unravel.
Yeah. That's actually a really interesting way to look at it. It kind of takes the pressure off, you know?
Right, it shifts that whole perspective.
Yeah. From feeling stuck to feeling curious.
Exactly. It's about embracing that sense of wonder and approaching the problem with a beginner's mind. Like, ask yourself,
Mm.
what assumptions am I making? What information am I missing? Who could I talk to who might have a fresh perspective on this?
It's like turning it into an adventure.
Exactly. And don't forget, Feynman thought the joy of discovery should be part of the process. So, like, don't be afraid to experiment, play around with different approaches, you know, have some fun with it.
Okay, I'm feeling a little bit better about that project now. And Feynman also makes this point about the responsibility that comes with knowledge. Like he says that scientists, A&D, just regular people, all have this duty to use what they know wisely to make the world a better place.
It's a big responsibility for sure. And it's super relevant today, especially with all the challenges we're facing like climate change and artificial intelligence and everything. The choices we make about how to use our knowledge, they're going to have a huge impact on the future.
Yeah, it's almost like we're holding this really powerful tool and we have to learn how to use it carefully.
Yeah. We need to be thoughtful, ethical,
Hmm.
you know, like really consider all the possible consequences of what we're doing, both the ones we intend and the ones we don't.
Right. It's not just about can we do this, but should we do this? And then if so, how can we do it in a way that's actually beneficial, not harmful?
Exactly. And that's where I think Feynman's point about freedom of thought is so crucial. We need to have all these different voices and perspectives and then ideas at the table to make sure that science is used for good.
I see what you mean. Like if we only have one narrow point of view, then we might miss some really important ethical considerations or potential risks.
Right. It's like a society that embraces open inquiry and critical thinking and, respectful dialogue. That's the kind of society that can really harness the power of science in a way that benefits everybody.
That makes a lot of sense. Wow, we've covered so much in this deep dive.
I know, right?
From science as a key to heaven and hell to this idea of embracing a philosophy of ignorance, Feynman really packed a lot into this essay.
He really did. And it's amazing how relevant his ideas still are today, like
Yeah.
even decades later.
I know. So as we wrap up here, what's one thing that really stood out to you from all this? Something that you're going to be thinking about even after we're done recording?
It's that phrase he uses about leaving the people of the future a free hand. It's like this powerful reminder that we don't have all the answers and we shouldn't try to force our limited understanding on future generations.
That's a beautiful way to put it. What does that idea mean to you personally?
To me, it means creating a world where like curiosity and open inquiry and critical thinking and the free exchange of ideas, like all of that is cherished,
Yeah.
protected,
Yeah.
where future generations have the freedom to explore and question and shape their own destinies.
That's a really inspiring vision. And I think it really makes us all think about what kind of legacy we want to leave behind, What impact are we having on the world in the future?
Yeah. And maybe this sparks a question for our listener, too. What does leaving future generations a free hand look like for you in your own life, in your work? How can you contribute to a world where curiosity and exploration aren't just tolerated, but actually celebrated?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a really powerful idea. And it makes me wonder, like, what are some things we can actually do, in our daily lives to help create that kind of world? A world where people feel free to explore and question things.
Well, I think it starts with just being curious ourselves, while
Yeah.
really cultivating that sense of wonder and encouraging that in others, too. Like, let's ask questions and be open to different perspectives. Be willing to learn from anyone.
Yeah, it's like that saying, never stop learning.
Exactly.
But it's not just about absorbing information either. It's about being willing to challenge like our assumptions and to think critically about things and, even to have those tough conversations with people who might see things differently than we do.
You got it. It's so easy to stay in our own little bubbles where everyone agrees with us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think real growth happens when we step outside of our comfort zones, when we actually engage with people who have different perspectives.
Yeah.
And we're willing to listen and learn and even have our own beliefs challenged sometimes.
Yeah,
It can be uncomfortable, but I think it's so important.
it is. And, you mentioned earlier that you're learning this new skill. I was wondering, has that experience changed the way you think about learning new things at all?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I've really come to appreciate that beginner's mindset. You know, that whole philosophy of ignorance that Feynman talks about?
Hmm.
It's actually really freeing. It takes the pressure of having to know everything.
Yeah.
And it allows me to just approach things with this sense of curiosity and excitement.
I bet it makes it more enjoyable, too.
Way more enjoyable. It's not about being perfect or having all the answers right. It's about the joy of discovery,
Yeah.
the journey.
Exactly. This has been such a fascinating deep dive into Feynman's work.
It really has.
I mean, he was obviously a brilliant physicist, but also such a strong advocate for using science for good.
Mm-hmm. And his ideas are just as relevant today as they were back then. They really make us think about the importance of, curiosity, responsibility, being open to new ideas.
Definitely. So as we wrap up here, what's one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this conversation? Something they can maybe apply to their own lives?
I think the biggest takeaway is to really embrace that philosophy of ignorance. Stay curious, be open to different perspectives, question everything, and never stop learning.
That's great advice. And remember, the world is full of mysteries just waiting to be uncovered.
It is.
So keep exploring and never lose that sense of wonder. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.